All right, everyone. This is Brett Pawlowski with NC3T. It's 2 o'clock, which was our promised start time, so I'd like to go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome you all today. Appreciate you giving us the chance to share our thoughts on the value of partnerships, talk a little bit about who we are, and talk for a few minutes about how NC3T can support you in employer engagement work. I'm joined today by Kathy Schick, who is probably going to be silent up until the very end. She's going to be manning the chat window. So if you have questions or if you're having technical problems, you can just put those into the chat window and Kathy will be able to help you with those. We probably won't answer questions until the end just to keep this moving pretty smoothly. And also as a reminder, we're going to be sending out materials after this webinar. We promised a copy of our partnership quality standards, which we will send you. And we'll also send you links to some of our resources and some of the materials mentioned in this presentation. So today we're going to spend about 20 minutes just providing an overview who NC3T is and who I am in particular. We'll take a couple minutes to talk about our approach to industry education partnerships, and we'll offer some examples of some of the work that we've done in the past, including some of our books, some of the workshops that we do, as well as a couple examples of the consulting and coaching work that we've done for clients. So in terms of who NC3T is, our full name is the National Center for College and Career Transitions, which explains why we call it NC3. It's a much shorter name to work with. We were founded 6 years ago, co-founded by Hans Meter and myself, with a focus on career-connected learning. And as you can see from our mission, every learner with a dream and a plan, and every community with a capable, ready workforce, we're interested in both sides of that coin. We're trying to connect schools to the communities and connect communities to the schools, all with the goal of making sure that every student has an opportunity to identify a pathway for themselves and build an actionable plan and do what they can to move forward on that plan. And anytime that you're talking about this sort of career-connected learning, whether it's a comprehensive school, whether it's an academy or a CTE environment, this work cannot happen without partnerships, which is why we wanted to share some of our work with you today. The idea for the company was, it came from Hans Meter, who many people in the field know. He was former Deputy Assistant Secretary at the Department of Ed. And Hans also has a great partnership resume of his own. Spent years and years in CTE and STEM education, did a lot of work with the National Alliance for Business, changed the equation through his own consulting firm, Meter Consulting, before we launched NC3T. And I was the co-founder of the group 6 years ago, and I thought it might be good to go into my background just a little bit more, as I'm the person who is sort of the point person for all of our partnership work. I started with partnership work about 18 years ago, working with a company called Topics Education, which is a local company here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And at the very beginning, we started to work with businesses that were interested in supporting education, but it was primarily in the area of curriculum development, providing free instructional resources, that sort of thing. After about a year or two of that, started to realize that when it comes to industry supporting education, that curriculum support is really a very narrow band of a very broad spectrum of ways that business and education can work together. And so from that point on, I started to explore that more deeply and started to expand the types of services that we provided to a lot of these firms, primarily national firms. And you can see some of the clients here from the government sector, from nonprofit, from the corporate world. And we still do a lot of this sort of national level consulting and technical assistance work. But a few years after working with clients like that and realizing the full spectrum of ways that industry can support education, I went and started my own firm, the Haviland Associates, in 2005, because I found that my greatest passion for this work happened at the practitioner level. So it's really sort of the local level, the district level, individual educators and administrators working with their corporate partners. I think that that's where some of the most exciting work happens, and I think that that's where some of the greatest levels of support are needed. So as sort of a zealot for partnership work, in addition to the client-specific work, I did a lot of work in terms of research, industry surveys, started to do webinars, trainings, started to hold events, including a national conference, the Effective Education Partnerships Conference. Actually published a newsletter for 3 years called the K-12 Partnership Report, which was really sort of a hands-on practical guide with how-to articles, case studies, that sort of thing. And even to this day, I'm still excited and still see the incredible value that partnerships bring to the work that educators are doing in the classroom. And so when Hans asked me to join him in founding NC3T, and I saw the potential for the role of partnerships in career-connected learning, I jumped on it. And from that point on, I've continued this partnership work and expanded it with a range of additional clients and additional kinds of support. I've got a couple of books under my belt now. We've got some more on the way, and we'll talk about it in just a minute. Now, in terms of our perspective on partnerships, our approach to partnerships, I've said many times over the past several years that the partnership field feels like a middle school dance, where you've got the boys and the girls on opposite ends of the gym. They want to get together. They want to talk to each other. It's awkward. They're not really sure how. And sometimes it just takes that brave boy and that brave girl to go out in the middle of the dance floor. But there's a couple of reasons that partnerships still feel this way. One is that we've never really been taught how to do partnerships. I mean, if you look at the programs of study for teacher education, or even a lot of the PD out there, there's very little talk about how to work with community partners or industry partners. So there's a real need for education around how do you have those conversations, how do you understand the perspective of the person on the other side of the table, what sorts of things can you do together? And those are all things that can be taught, and with a little bit of practice you can get proficient in those. The other challenge in the partnership field is that for a lot of people, the value proposition has not been clear. Partnerships, again, I mean, it can start to feel awkward at first. It can require a fair amount of time to get these things going. And people may not see the value. And I mean, with your schedule as full as it usually is on a day-to-day basis as an educator, it's very easy to push this off to the next day. You've got more urgent things to worry about because we're not taught what the value is in those partnerships. And so as we work, whatever we're doing, whether it's developing resources, coaching with clients, that sort of thing, we always put that idea of value and return on investment front and center in terms of the work that we're doing. We try to keep that as a focal point throughout. So I do want to talk just for a minute about what sort of value partnerships provide to people. And certainly the first thought that people have, especially when it comes to career and technical education, is the idea of workforce preparedness. And certainly that is a central theme. It's a central benefit for employers working with educators. But there are a lot of other benefits as well. There are benefits in terms of sort of the goodwill that they get with customers. There's a lot of benefit, not only for the long-term benefits of workforce preparedness, but the immediate benefits from employees being able to work with students. There's higher morale, employees who are able to volunteer and do good things in the field, that they feel better, they're more motivated, they work harder, they stay at a company longer. There are operational benefits, and certainly just on an individual basis, the people who get to work with students, they personally feel good, they personally feel like they're doing something important. For those who share expertise, maybe through an advisory board, there's also some skill building and some resume development. So there's a lot of benefits to your industry partners. And obviously for the students, there's a lot of benefits in terms of career exploration and career preparedness, but there's a lot of other benefits as well. In terms of bringing employers to the table with students, it can improve dropout rates. In Nashville, for example, they talk about the crime situation there. They're now a wall-to-wall career academy model where there's a lot of employer engagement throughout. Before they did that, the average age of a gang member was 16, and now it's 22. Educators who were surveyed said that students improved their attainment. They chose harder classes, they stayed in school longer. There's actually sort of a meta study from Education Employers, which is a group in the UK, where they found out that students enjoyed school more, they want to do better, they're better prepared for career decisions. They even tracked sort of longitudinally and found that it improves student social mobility and potential earnings. So beyond the specifics of career preparedness, there's a lot of benefits for students as well. And finally, I think it's really important to think about the advantages to educators and administrators, because I think it's just sort of a cop-out to say, well, educators should do this because it's for the kids, it's good for the kids. I mean, certainly it is, but again, educators have a really full plate. Here in North Carolina, we say that it's like trying to put 5 pounds of flour in a 3-pound bag. Your day is full, partnership work can be time-consuming, and we've got to be sure that there are real benefits to the educators involved in this work. And there are benefits in terms of not only the student outcomes, which make you look good as educators and administrators. It makes the learning process easier. You also get professional and material support. You've got industry partners who are there to provide support, to make sure that you can stay current in a field that you're working in. The level of support you can get from your industry partners can make this a personally and professionally fulfilling initiative, even beyond the benefits that your students are getting. So again, as we talk about ROI, this idea of return on investment, for whatever you put into these partnerships, you're going to be receiving things. And our operating mode going forward with all of our work around partnerships focused on this whole 360 ROI. So everyone who we're asking to contribute to a partnership should be getting something out of that. And that includes your administrators, it includes your parents. Sometimes parents have to sign waivers. They have to come pick up their kids after school where they otherwise would have been taking the bus. We have to explain to parents what's in this for them. So that's sort of our operating model with all the partnership work that we do. We'll show a few examples of the ways that we do that. We'll talk about the books and the handbooks and the guides that we've produced. We'll give a couple examples of some of the PD that we do around the country, and we'll share a couple examples of some of the consulting and coaching work that we do as well. So in terms of our printed materials, this book, the Employer Engagement Toolkit, is really sort of our foundational piece. It's a book that I co-authored back in 2014 with a fellow named Charlie Katz, who was the head of employer engagement for the National Academy Foundation. So he brought a lot of expertise to the table, invaluable collaborator in developing this resource. The book is really sort of a hands-on soup-to-nuts guide to building strong and sustainable partnerships, with some discussion about the partnership essentials, the 9 different partnership models that we've identified and sort of fleshed out, information on how to find and engage industry partners, data on how to do the measurement and evaluation piece of a partnership, some talk about sustainability, and then a deep dive into advisory boards, along with about 15 case studies to show different types of partnerships in different types of situations. We have a few very hands-on specific guides. One developed by Chris Copeland with all the forms you need to develop a work-based learning program, including parent approval forms, project setup forms, employer agreements, things like that. We have a book put together by Tom Sudworth with all the forms you need for advisory boards, including multiple examples of bylaws, agendas, minutes, member letters, and those sorts of things. We have, point to the one on the right first, a fellow named Ed Schaefer, who is just a very experienced, very sharp person in the field, developed a very thorough self-assessment guide to work-based learning. It's an excellent resource. We also, actually, Building Advisory Boards That Matter was the first project that I worked on with Hans, even before we started NC3T. We were brought together by some folks at ACTE to do this book together. We actually don't sell this book on our website. It's actually only available through ACTE. But all the other resources on here you can get at NC3T.com. And actually all of these are available for bulk orders as well. And we tie them in pretty well to the professional development of the workshops that we do, which is a nice segue to talking about some of the PD that we do. Our bread and butter workshop is a half-day workshop. It's the guide to building strong and sustainable partnerships, or Partnerships 101, where we talk about some of those essential concepts, including the return on investment, sort of around the table. We talk about the idea of a partnership of equals, where everyone is contributing to this partnership and everyone is receiving something of value from it. And we talk about the long game, which is the fact that you can't go to a partner and just ask for money. I mean, you're going to get a very low pickup from that sort of activity. It's a matter of developing the relationship, developing trust, and developing a history of success in order to build those deeper and deeper levels of engagement and working with your partners. We spend a great deal of time on the 9 different partnership models, which are detailed in the Employer Engagement Toolkit, where we're talking about advisory boards, we're talking about real-world challenges, we're talking about work-based learning, advisory support, we're talking about advocacy, and all sorts of different models that are worth considering as you look for ways to work with your partners. And in this workshop, and really in every workshop, we spend some time talking about how do you find and engage industry partners, because whenever we do workshops, that is almost guaranteed to be the first question that we hear. Nobody feels like they have the network to develop those relationships, but in reality, we all pretty much do if we know how to use our networks effectively. We have a half-day workshop on advisory boards. I actually just did this one and the work-based learning workshop last Thursday in Norfolk, Virginia, with a fellow named Tom Sudreth. The advisory board workshop, where we talk about what are the advantages of an advisory board, what does an advisory board do. There's a great visioning activity to really help people sort of unlock and see the potential and the value that an advisory board can bring to your program and to your school. We talk about the operational elements of advisory boards, including the board setup, your founding documents, the structure of the board, that sort of thing, how to find and engage members, what are the member roles. We talk about the day-to-day operations in terms of how do you set an agenda, how do you host a meeting, that sort of thing. We do have some advisory board quality standards that we share through this workshop and encourage people to review their current advisory boards against these standards and look for opportunities for improvement. And then again, we do have that how to find partners piece as well. Finally, the third to share in terms of the workshops that we do is the work-based learning workshop, where we talk again about the benefits of work-based learning to your students, to your business partners, to your educators, to your administrators, to your parents. We talk about the different partnership models as they relate to work-based learning. We talk about planning for success. Sometimes you see programs where there's no industry engagement until it's time to sort of throw kids into the deep end with an internship or an apprenticeship, when maybe a better approach to get kids prepared for that experience is to look at a long-term plan for deeper and deeper levels of work with partners to fully prepare them for those experiences. We talk about establishing quality standards for each of your work-based learning experiences, whether that's a job shadow day or a full apprenticeship. And then again, we talk about how to find partners as well. And so finally, the last 2 things that I wanted to share, I am trying to stick very close to 20 minutes for the overview, is some of the consulting and coaching work that we do. A lot of the consulting work and strategic planning and resource development work we do takes place at the state levels. We do a lot of work with state departments of education. This year, and I can send you a link to this tomorrow with the other materials, this is a copy of a Career Program Advisory Committee handbook that we did for Minnesota State. They update their advisory committee resources every 5 or 6 years, and we went through this process where we brought local stakeholders from across the state together as guides and reviewers for the development of this handbook. So we got together for a full day trying to figure out what it was that advisory program leaders needed in Minnesota, looking for local examples, case studies, that sort of thing, and they played an active role in reviewing the drafts as they came out. So this piece was truly a Minnesota handbook, and we're very happy with how that turned out. We're actually in the process of developing a similar handbook for another state. We do a lot of different types of work with the state departments of education, some specifically around partnerships, some more broadly tuned to CTE program quality, and some technical assistance work and that sort of thing as well. The last example I wanted to share with you is an example of some of our site level coaching, where we did work over a few years with the Rochester City School District up in New York. And there was a new director of CTE and career pathways, and the first thing that he asked us to do is develop a partnership map. So talk to all of the program leaders across the city, find out the status of their advisory board, who their key partners were, what sort of work-based learning initiatives they had in place, just so he could get a real sense of the level of partnership activity that was taking place in the district and where he might focus his attention going forward to provide the greatest level of support for his programs. As a follow-on to that piece, we did some skills mapping. We brought in employers representing 6 different industry sectors, and we sat and talked to them for a few hours each, trying to find out in terms of technical, academic, and employability skills, what they wanted to see in qualified applicants. And from that, we developed a report that was shared out not only to the educators to help with their course planning, but also to the employers so they could see that we had heard what they were telling us. And actually, as part of a third engagement, we used that report as the basis for meetings between educators and some of their industry partners to try to kick off some collaborations, whether those are advisory board collaborations or work-based learning initiatives or things like that. But it was a great way to show employers that they were being heard and that we were responding to their needs, which was a fantastic way to encourage buy-in. And so that was a lot in 20 minutes. So I'm going to stop here. And if we have any questions that you've put into the chat window, Kathy, if you could sort of compile those and share those out.
Will do. I'm just waiting for some questions to come in.
And if we don't have any, that's fine as well. We will be sending out a copy of this PowerPoint, our partnership quality standards, links to some of these other resources. And I will say that if you do want to talk to NC3T about your partnership development efforts, whether those are a need for resources, whether it's a need for professional development or sort of more personalized support, my contact information is up on the screen. That is my home office number and my email address, and would be happy to talk to you at any point.
Brett, first I want to thank Dorette for her kind words. She said you gave a wonderful presentation. And Diane would like to know if the session on Wednesday afternoon of the ACTE Vision Conference requires separate registration.
It does. That is a pre-conference session. I believe that those are $150 each. We're actually, Hans is doing one on pathways in the morning. I'm doing the employer engagement workshop from 1 to 5 that Wednesday afternoon. It is $150. Attendees will get a free copy of the employer engagement toolkit.
Have you done any work with DoD schools?
We actually have not. That sounds like it would be a really interesting challenge. But no, we've not done that work yet.
Will there be an audio copy of this webinar? I'd like to share it with my leadership team.
Actually, there will. We recorded this, and I believe that we're planning to clean this up next week. And once we have this, we'll be happy to send out a link.
And here's a good content question. How do you evaluate the effectiveness of partnerships beyond anecdotally?
It's a hard question to answer insofar as there are so many different types of partnerships out there. I mean, you can look at for example, with an advisory board, you can look at activity measurements in terms of how often they meet, how large the board is, who they represent. You can look at outcomes, say that they have set goals for the year. Maybe it's, I sit on an advisory board for my son's school, and we have a goal as the advisory board to bring in all of the work-based learning partners that we need to serve the student for the year. So that right there is a great way to measure the effectiveness of your advisory board, to see which partners they've brought to the table.
Mm-hmm.
If you're talking about student measurements, it really varies by the type of partnership that you have. And some of these, you really can't do much more than sort of the pre-post surveys, more of the qualitative measurements, maybe some reflective writing, things like that, maybe the pre-post surveys, employer evaluations of the students, maybe during an internship or apprenticeship. If you're going to look at a sustained partnership, something where you've got ongoing relationships between the students and employers, there are examples of people sort of isolating those students in terms of their educational data and tracking that. They actually did some of this in Oklahoma City, where they segmented that group of students and tracked their performance over time to see if they improved on attendance, if they improved on grades, if dropout rates changed, if there were changes in the incident rates, things like that. But those are really sort of larger scale partnership initiatives.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess the short answer is that it really depends.
And Brett, will you come directly to schools to make a presentation?
We do workshops all over the country. So I was in Norfolk last week. I'll be in New Orleans in a few weeks. We're going to be up in Washington State a few weeks after that. I'll be in Kansas. Whether it's me or some of the other people that we have who do these presentations on a regular basis, we travel to where we need to be.
That's it for our questions right now, Brett.
Okay. Well, we did want to keep this short out of respect for everyone's time. I know it's the start of the school year, so I certainly appreciate everyone taking the time to join us today. I will be sending out an email with the information that I promised by tomorrow, and once we have this presentation recorded and cleaned up, we'll send a link out to that next week. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and I hope I get a chance to talk to all of you soon. Kathy, I'm going to ask you how I